Okay, take two. So, while in isolation, I've been sharing some stories of when I was on the road years ago, like a lot of years ago, almost 30. Um, and people have said that I should compile these into a book. And I still might do that. But one of the things I want to do before that happens is to get them down on video here on my YouTube channel, just so there's video documentation of it as well. Why not? So I did a whole bunch of different stories that were kind of out of order chronologically. So I'm going to start pretty much at the beginning with the first tour. This would have been in the fall of 1990. Um, yeah, September, October of 1990. And I'll just read you how it all started. It's on my Facebook profile, but I figured that I would have it on video here too. So I'm going to just start this out and read it to you as it is on my Facebook. I might interject a few other comments here and there as necessary, but whatever, here it is. Okay, so here's the first one. It's funny, I don't even remember when or why I started doing this, however many days ago that it was that I shared my first story. I guess because I all of a sudden had a bunch of extra time on my hands. It is true that only a handful of folks have ever heard these stories before, not that they come up in conversation much, but we all have our story or stories that play a big part in shaping us into who we are and what we end up being as we get older. And this happens to be part of my journey that has gotten me to this point, wherever that is. And I encourage anyone else in Faceplant Land, that's my nickname for Facebook, you'll find out, to do the same if the spirit moves you, especially now when we have such a perfect opportunity to share, since most of us aren't really going anywhere anytime soon. So, of course, with the lockdown. So, as a professional musician and one who spends much time playing music that is primarily improvised, me, as well as my friends and colleagues who do this, freely share what we do wherever and whenever we can. It can be a scary thing to do at first, but it becomes one of the most worthwhile and fulfilling things we could ever do. And I think that's a big reason we are so willing to share not only our music, but a piece of who we are in general. I guess that's why I'm typing up all these stories. If I can stand up in front of an audience of anywhere from 25 to 17,000 people and just make music, whether reading it or off the top of my head, and not sound like a complete idiot, hopefully, then typing these out and sharing these stories of when I was out on the road doing just that is easy in comparison. This will sum it up pretty quickly, I think. I recently saw a quote from Pablo Picasso that I vowed I would commit to memory. Not very many words, but it says much. And the quote is, "The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away." And so I continue on. One of the things I haven't done is go further back to the beginning of how it was I ended up doing all these tours with these artists and musicians. With the exception of the first tour, which I will explain in a minute, the other three tours all started out in Los Angeles. So how did that work? It's not like Calgary and Los Angeles are just down the road a piece from each other. Well, a big part of how this all worked was meeting the right person at the right time and having the ability to deliver what was asked of me when asked to do so. And as the old saying goes, I would take luck over skill any day. Well, I don't know about any day, but in a lot of cases, yes. In the summer of 1990, I was 23, myself and Calgary drummer John DeWall traveled to Port Townsend, Washington to attend a jazz camp run by Los Angeles saxophonist Bud Shank called the Bud Shank Jazz Workshop. The month prior to this is when I was at the jazz camp at Emporia State University in Kansas that I had mentioned in one of my previous stories. I'll get to that story eventually, just so you know. So I had decided to do two jazz camps that summer, this being the second one. I attended the camp with my Barry sax, and one of the things that was part of the camp was that we did master classes on our various instruments. There was a baritone sax master class led by Seattle saxophonist Bill Ramsey that I attended each day. While in that class, I met a fellow student of the camp named John Goodmanson, now a saxophone professor and director of jazz studies at Utah State University. He was from Bellingham, Washington, and who, when realizing I was from Calgary, mentioned that he knew a trombone player from here who he had toured with earlier that year, and it turned out to be somebody that I knew and played with quite a bit here. And those of you who are older Calgary musicians may remember Mark McGregor, who ended up passing away a number of years ago. He moved to Sudbury, Ontario, but that's who that was, Mark McGregor. They were on tour together with the Harry James Orchestra, with the band being led by Seattle trumpeter and former Harry James band member Fred Radke. Over the next few days, I asked John a handful of questions about the tour and how it came about that he was chosen to go on tour. At one point, in passing, I said to him that if he was unable to do any of these tours and he was okay recommending me, I would be happy to go. His response was, well, as a matter of fact, I have been asked to do a 4-week tour with singer Vic Damone and singer-actress Diahann Carroll, Damone's wife at the time. And I'm going back to university to start my master's degree, so I'm going to turn it down. So needless to say, John and I kept in touch about this, and sure enough, I got a call from the contractor, Joe Graydon, in Los Angeles, and he gave me the tour start date and told me that a plane ticket and itinerary were being sent by courier to me, and that the tour would begin in Panama City, to which my response was, Panama? Thinking that would be very cool. To which his response was, no, Panama City, Florida. I'm not even sure back then if I knew that there was a Panama City, Florida, but anyway. So not long after that, I was hopping a Delta Airlines flight with my bari sax and bass clarinet, Calgary to Salt Lake City to Atlanta, Atlanta to Panama City. Seattle trumpeter Fred Radke was the band leader on this tour. We did one rehearsal and did our first concert the next night. The next night, there I was in my tux, seated at the end of the sax section with my bari sax on a stand to my right and my bass clarinet on an alto sax stand beside my left foot. The bell of the bass clarinet just fit perfectly into that alto stand. Anyway, the concert hall seated about 2,500, and we figured there were about 2,000 people there or so. A good start. At one point, while Vic Damone was talking to the audience, a quiet moment, of course, I shifted in my seat. My left foot hit the stand my bass clarinet was on, of course. Out the corner of my eye, I see the bass clarinet tipping over, of course. It slams against the stage with a loud bang, of course, which was bad enough, but then, of course, my metal mouthpiece cap flew off and started rolling around down the stage with a loud clang, clang, clang. At which point Vic turned around, looked at me and said, is it okay? I slumped down in my chair and said, yeah, it'll be fine. At that point, I felt like throwing my horns in the ocean. Yes, I did. And since we were in Florida, right on the water, that would have been easy. But I resisted that urge. Needless to say, I never lived that one down for the rest of the tour. And one of the things that I did mention was that I was then not addressed by my first name or anything. I was addressed by Greenhorn. that was the name everybody called me for the rest of the tour. Anyway, deservedly, I guess. Vic Damone, Vito Ferranola was his birth name, was such a nice guy, and he was always pleasant with us. Took the band out to a very swanky and delicious Italian restaurant in Scottsdale, Arizona. I remember that very well. After our 2 Arizona concerts were done, one at the Grady Gamage Concert Hall on the Arizona State University campus in Tempe, and the other at the Sun Dome in Sun City. Just a real down-to-earth, sweet guy. Diahann, on the other hand, was hard to figure out. Sometimes super nice, then cranky, then drunk and even more cranky. Yes. And at times very much a diva. But it seemed that Vic could always calm her down and talk her off the ledge when necessary. After playing a concert in Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Pittsburgh, we went to our respective hotels. They would stay at the Ritz-Carlton and such, and we'd be at the Howard Johnson or the Holiday Inn. The next morning, we boarded our band bus to the Pittsburgh airport to catch a flight to Phoenix. As we arrived, the road manager handed out all the tickets to us. We went through security and proceeded to our gate. As the boarding time quickly approached, there was still no sign of Vic and Diahann anywhere until about 20 minutes before the flight was to leave. And you know how that's cutting that close now, especially nowadays too. We thought it was odd that they were delayed like that, but later we found out that they had gotten into a fight back at the hotel room. Diahann had trashed the room, almost setting fire to the curtains, and their manager had to assess the cost of the damage before leaving the hotel, hence the reason they were so late in getting to Pittsburgh International. All in all, it was a great first tour, and I think I made a good impression, which I was very happy about. Well, except for kicking over my bass clarinet, I guess. Oh. Before Vic and Diahn's tour was done, Fred Radke approached me and said that when we got back to Los Angeles, he wanted to make arrangements for me to stay there for 5 days and then go back out for another 6 weeks on another tour he was leading, this time with Pat Boone and Florence Henderson. As much as I as much as it would have been cool to meet and hang out with Mrs. Brady from the Brady Bunch for 6 weeks, I ended up saying no due to other commitments back home. Plus, about 2 weeks after that tour would finish, I was heading out again with the Jimmy Dorsey Band for 3 months. That would have been 22 weeks of touring, more living out of a suitcase than I wanted to do at any one time, I guess. And then it says, anyway, below is a cool souvenir that I took with me after the tour ended. And I'm going to get a shot of that for you. See if I can do this. Hopefully you can see that. A nice autographed picture from Diahann and Vic together. That was very cool. And it was a great way to start things off. I did sorry about the finger there. I did 3 other tours after that and a few other things that I mentioned on some of these other ones, but I wanted to get that first one down and get this loaded onto my YouTube channel, which is brand new actually. So just thinking about content to post, and I got a lot of people saying that they would like me to put these things into a book or whatever, but I thought doing it video first would be kind of cool, and then we'll see what happens after that. So anyway, hopefully that wasn't too boring. I got a few others, so that's tour number 1. Okay, bye.